それでは時間となりましたので、セミナーを開始いたします。本日座長を務めますのは、九州大学アジア・オセアニア研究教育機構研究推進ディレクターのスコット・バレンタイン教授です。バレンタイン先生、よろしくお願いいたします。
Great. Thank you very much and welcome everybody to our brown bag seminar number 12. In many ways, this should actually be called a gold bag seminar. There are many elements that are truly best practice in delivering these. Flawless organization from our QAOS team, world-class translations, fully bilingual. And of course, the series is intended to highlight many of Kyushu University's most outstanding research professors. My name is Scott Valentine. I'm Director of Research Promotions at QAOS, and it's my pleasure to have invited and receive the acceptance by Professor Higo, who's going to be talking to us about the coming of a death-laden society, main challenges to medicine and healthcare of a hyper-aged Japan. Prof. Higo, as you can probably see if we click forward to his profile, or not, is oh, there we go. Has a great depth of experience. If you look back at some of the research that he's done in the past, as I have, you'll gain an appreciation that this is a senior researcher who is on a journey of increasing depth in an area that is extremely important, not just for Japan, not just for Asia, but for all industrialized countries that are now in the throes of rapid aging societies. In the past, Prof. Higo has done extensive work looking at the nexus of working lives and aging societies. So he looked at aging working lives in Japan and the UK, the perils of mandatory retirement, the detriments of retirement in an aging society, the reform of retirement practices. You can maybe see from the topics that I've introduced how Prof. Higo is on a trajectory where he is going deeper and deeper into a more personalized journey for retirees that are facing real challenges. Today's talk, Death-Laden Society. Well, when ballooning deaths and the associated economic and social problems linked to aging pose structural problems as they are now, this is a topic that we all need to be investigating. So amidst this, Prof. Higo's focus, which is on the quality of a dignified death, is largely ignored and an extremely interesting topic. I believe that you can say this: how we treat our elders defines us. And so with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Higo. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
All right, just give me a second. Let me do screen sharing first. Okay, am I still coming through? Yes, all right. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Valentine, for really wonderful, nice introduction of myself. The way you introduced me really makes me sound like I'm somebody with a great accomplishment. Thank you. You've already made my day. I also want to say a word of thank you for everybody, all of you joining this seminar today. And once again, I am Masa Higo, and nice meeting you all. So I'm here to talk about the coming of what I call a death-laden society, Society overwhelmed, troubled, and challenged by, and therefore laden with deaths, something related to death. Sounds creepy, sounds sinister. Where would this happen? Here in Japan, first, but then it will likely happen in a number of countries around the world, in coming decades following the path of Japan. So for this short seminar, I will first explain to you what I mean by a death-laden society and what it looks like statistically. And also I'd like to share with you main challenges that this stage of social conditions will likely posit to us. And if time permits, I also like to outline some suggestions for future research and policy making to make these social conditions less deadly, less creepy, more sustainable and less challenging. But at the beginning, would you do me a favor? I mean, I'm asking for everybody. I'd like to ask you a question, open-ended question. You don't have to answer this question right now. You don't even have to share with me your answer at any point during this seminar. But please keep this question somewhere back in your mind and then trying to address this question and hopefully find your answer to this question by the end of this talk. So the question is simple, but listen carefully. How would you like to die? Say that again. How would you like to die? No, I don't want to die in the first place. What's the question? What kind of question is this? I don't want to die either, at least anytime soon. But I'm not asking whether or not we are going to die, but I'm asking how. Would you like to spend the last weeks, days, and moments of your life? Let's just say where and with whose presence and care and attention would you like to make the final transition in life, moving from life to unlife and ceasing to exist in this world? Think about it. Right? All right. So let's go. Moving to the next slide. First off, let me make it clear that coming of death-laden societies, in many ways, demographic consequence of aging society characterized by population aging, and I think you know what it is, right? Increase in older people, not necessarily the number of them, but a share of the total population. And as you can see here, Japan is the world forerunner of population aging today, and it's been the case since the late 90s. And Japan will likely remain world leading or most representative hyper-aged society and well into the second half of this century. In coming decades, some countries in Asia will soon catch up with the rate of Japan's population aging. Here you can see some examples, like South Korea, China as a whole, and Thailand, but these are only just a few examples. Many other countries in Asia are on the way to follow the path of Japan. All right. So now this figure will show you why Japan will be what could be called a death-laden society in the coming decade or possibly in coming years. So in many ways, we have already been a death-laden society. We are looking at annual numbers of deaths that take place in Japan from 1955 through 2065, past trend and future projection. I know you don't like the title of this figure, like deaths. But let's just think about the university campus. Right? Every year, we welcome a large number of freshman students coming to join us. Every year, we're going to have to see off a large number of graduates. Many people in, many people out, so goes the society as a whole. And here we are just looking at how many people die every year during this time period. Here you go. Doesn't sound so exciting, but here you see that between 1955 and 1990, over the course past 35 years. Annually, about 700,000 people died every year, 0.7 million. Right? To your right, from 2030 through 2065 at least, the corresponding number goes above 1,600,000, or almost 1,700,000. 1.7 million people will die every year, according to this projection. A huge jump, overwhelming number of people will die every year from the point on. Significant jump, more than double. And there's no official cutoff point or threshold into the stage of a death-laden society, but annual occurrence of about 1.7 million deaths will start happening from 2030. So, and this trend will likely continue over the next several decades, or possibly through the end of the century. So for the sake of the conversation, let's just consider 2030 as the beginning of Japan's becoming a death-laden society. And this trend actually goes against the current of our times from an international, global perspective. Worldwide, deaths have been taking place less and less frequently. Japan's case goes quite the opposite, right? I'm not talking about the absolute number of deaths that happens worldwide. The number has been increasing because of the expansion of the population, but I'm talking about the frequency of the occurrence of deaths measured by crude death rate per 1,000 population. And roughly over the past 2 decades, if you take a very close look at the cases of some other Asian countries here, including the case of Thailand, China as a whole, and Vietnam, South Korea, right, and Singapore, you can see that those countries seem to have been slowly following Japan's path to a death-laden society. So more and more people will die in Japan. What's going to happen? Who died? Whose death will push Japan to be a death-laden society? That's what we're going to clarify here. The answer is very obvious, right? Thanks to the well-developed medicine and wide availability of quality healthcare service nationwide, and particularly those in post-war Japan, post-war period. Today, here in Japan, most of people die in their old age, quite advanced age, in the 80s and 90s. So simply put, in the future, more and more people will die in Japan because of old age. And when it comes to this topic, some of my students often kind of start tiptoeing around me and kind of trying to find a chance to whisper into my ears and saying, Professor Higo, I know it's not nice to say, but isn't the coming of a death-laden society supposed to be good news for Japan? Because, that means Japan can finally get rid of a whole bunch of older people, unproductive population, and wouldn't that ease the burden on younger people, right? If that's what's on your mind, let me tell you something. That's the whole assumption plain wrong, right? The answer is no. Just to be clear, it's not that Japan's population aging ends when it becomes a death-laden society. Japan fades into the era of a death-laden society precisely because, as you can see here, its population continues aging. So fairly soon, every year, the country will start seeing unprecedented number of people dying, mostly of old age, and this is the key, with a continuous decline in childbirth, as you can see here, only with older people increase as a relative share of the total population, right? That's the definition of population aging, nothing but population aging. And another straightforward direct impact of the coming and arrival of a death-laden society is drastic and ceaseless depopulation. That's been already happening since 2007, to be accurate. So by, for example, year 2080, the total population of this country will be pretty much the same as back in the war time, or say, back in 40s and 50s. Same size, but entirely different age composition of the population, as you can see here. So let's just chat about, how to make sense of why this happens. Right? First, I'm going to show you the population pyramids. Right? Population pyramids. Japan's case doesn't look like a pyramid anymore, but population pyramids of the world total population versus Japan from 2020 through 2060. I won't say much, but please pay close attention to what's going to happen to two major baby boom generations in Japan. The first one, the baby boomers, the original one. The second one, the juniors. The baby boom generation are in their mid-70s today, and the junior generations are in their late 40s. I'm part of the junior generation. I'm quite anxious to see what's going to happen to my people. Okay, so move on to 2030, 40, 50, 60. Back to the present. Back to the Future. Do you like the movies, by the way? 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I hope you realize that as time goes by from 2020 to 60s, the size of the two boomers gets smaller and smaller. What does that mean? Why getting smaller? Where do they go? Do they go to somewhere like in Hawaii? No. As time goes by, more and more of them will die, disappear out of this world. Or simply, as time goes by, more and more of them will die of old age. So the presence, first of all, the presence of big age cohorts like boomers, right, and their aging, growing older, which is natural, are the key element, key factors behind the coming of a death-laden society. Plus, advancement of medicine and developmental welfare states, welfare policies have made a significant contributions to, extending our, longevity, lifespan. So, life expectancies, to be accurate. And that's their fundamental professional mission, like to keep us healthy and alive for as long as possible. Thanks to that, we've come to live longer than any other, any previous generations, not just in Japan, but worldwide. Thank you. And it's a great triumph of modern medicine and healthcare as institutionalized in Japan. But population aging doesn't slow down so long as childbirth remains stagnant or continue declining, even worse. That's the case in Japan. So no matter how hard we try to keep us, healthy and alive for as long as possible, at the end of the day, we have to confront the fact that we are all mortal. We will all die. Right? And today, here in Japan, typically in the late 80s. So the coming of a death-laden society is not an accident. Let me make it clear that it's a natural and demographically speaking, pretty logical consequence of, first of all, not just standard population aging, but very fast, rapid population aging, as in the case in Japan and South Korea and Singapore, Taiwan, and some urban China, like Hong Kong and Macau. Number two, prolonged longevity, thanks to the modern medicine and healthcare. Number three, human mortality, which nothing can overcome or nothing should overcome. Right? So what are the major challenges of death-laden society? maybe you can start imagining how the coming of death-laden society shape or reshape our day-to-day lives. But, well, first of all, economists and national leaders, business leaders have a good reason to worry about how it's going to impact the country's, national vitality, ever competitive global economies. And I'm a sociologist. So from this perspective, I'm terribly curious how this is going to reshape our culture, say, our cultural attitude toward death and dying. How about, conversely, our attitude toward life? Life's meaning may be reshaped. How about intergenerational relationships and relations? Right? So a death-laden society will certainly affect a number of corners of our society, culture, economy, and politics, and you name it. But for this talk, let me focus mostly on something really urgent, immediate to our well-being in daily life today and in the conceivable future, medicine and healthcare. And I will outline very quickly 3 areas of challenges. The first area is anticipated shortages of fundamental medical resources, including hospital beds and doctors. And first of all, let's see where we die today. I mean, Japanese people, where do we die typically? I mean, we all used to be born at and die at home. That's where we came from, and that's where we return to. That's why we call it home. But as you can see here on the vertical line, since the mid-70s, so 1977 to be accurate, medical institutions like hospitals and special clinics have taken over the position of being the most conventional place of death, place where to die. Parallel to what could be called a medicalization of Japan. Are you familiar with this expression, like medicalization of society? Rapid development of modern medicine and wide availability of the services, and healthcare included, all across the country. So, but this trend that most people die at the hospital in Japan makes this country quite distinctive among developed countries today, because most other developed countries have been enabling or even encouraging more and more people to die in place. Die in place. Not just aging in place, but aging and die in where they have lived, where they feel most comfortable, such as their homes, in their community. So maybe including their long-term care facilities. So if this trend continues, most people die at the hospital in Japan, and in the coming death-laden society, simple calculation suggests that the country will be short of hospital beds for about 600 or could be nearly 700,000 people every year. That number of people will be lost in space, no place to die, at least as far as the conventional place of death is concerned. Also, doctor shortages are chronic issues in Japan, especially in rural areas. And it's very obvious, I don't have to say much, but we don't have enough doctors to survive the death-laden society. The second area is the budget, not a present topic to pursue, but important. National expenditure on medical care and healthcare combined, both of which has been and will continue to be soaring as the aging of the population progresses. And this is not sustainable, clearly. And I hope you agree with me, but it would be not just concerning, but highly questionable if those financial resources would be continuously used to keep people alive, just for the sake of helping them stay alive, keeping them from dying for as long as possible, regardless of their preferred way of completing their lives, wrapping up their lives, regardless of their individual choice and their individual health conditions. Number 3, so this is where I'd like to get back to the question I put on the table at the beginning. Right? Where would you like to die? Same as those around the world, many elderly people in Japan today prefer dying at home rather than medical institutions like hospitals. Why at home? Because this is where they feel most comfortable and feel that they can maintain a good sense of self and feel a good sense of who they are up until the last moment of their lives. Right? How about yourself? Would you agree or disagree with this national trend as suggested by this particular survey? That being said, promoting dying at home could be quite risky. Could be a quite risky business to pursue, especially in Japan. And it's coming death-laden society era, because as childbirth continues declining. More and more older people live alone. That's the trend. And here comes our nightmare. Right? Our nightmare may only grow, increasing the so-called lonely deaths. You know what it is, like dying all alone at home, and their bodies getting discovered several weeks or even several months after dying. It's not really a good way of wrapping up our lives. So the big picture is that our hyper-aged society is, as I said, in many ways a result of our social commitment and long-term effort to enhance a quality of life, so to speak. Good life. So what's good life? What's a good life and how to get it? Well, first, we do our best to cure our illnesses and injuries so as to keep us from dying, keep us alive for as long as possible. The longer we live, the better our life gets. Right? But to get prepared for the coming of a death-laden society, let me call serious attention, not just to quality of life, but also addressing quality of dying. And it's an awkward expression in English, but I choose to use this expression to emphasize that this is an antonym of quality of life, good life and good way of living this world. And those two are not mutually exclusive at all. Well, first, medicine and healthcare should continue enhancing our quality of life, no doubt about that, because that's a very foundation, infrastructure of a modern civilization. At the same time, I argue the coming of a death-laden society is calling for our attention. That's just the way we treat and care for dying people and those in really advanced age and could leave this world anytime soon, to respect their individual choice, their dignity and their comfort and peace. And of course, when we are talking about dying people, we are not talking about people out there. People are we are talking about ourselves in the future, our future. I think running out of time, but let me, before closing, let me quickly outline 5 possible directions that I think the soon-to-be death-laden society should start addressing. In-home medical care, you know what it is, your doctor's coming to your door. And continuous development of what is called telemedicine, remote healthcare for elderly patients should be more proactively pursued, I believe, particularly for those who desire to spend the last moments of their lives at home. And especially the telemedicine part has a lot of potential to help reduce the country's growing healthcare expenditures too. Number 3, hospices. The number of hospice facilities in Japan has been skyrocketingly increasing. That's good, especially over the past 2 decades. But still, even today, the total number of hospice beds is only slightly above 9,000 all across the country. 9,000 versus 1.7 million people dying every year. Most of them are very in a really advanced stage, and some of them are would be diagnosed as terminally ill. No comparison. However, rapid increase in hospice beds should be part of our agenda. Number 4, I'm sorry. No one wants to talk about it. Therefore, I'm going to have to talk about it. The so-called physician-assisted dying, some researchers call it physician-assisted suicide. It used to be referred to as voluntary euthanasia or even active euthanasia. This has been legalized, not in Japan, don't worry, but in increasing number of other developed countries over the past decades, including Switzerland, Belgium, the Netherlands, of course, the Netherlands. Anything unusual always happens first in the Netherlands, Canada, and increasing number of states in America, United States, and some parts of Australia. And I think New Zealand will soon be part of the list of these countries, just in a few years, I guess. The question is, why do they do this? Why do they go ahead and legalize the PAD, physician-assisted dying? Who asked for it? The request is not really coming from doctors or from the rest of the society. It's really from, mostly from elderly people, especially those terminally ill, and all that's left for their remaining life is growing pain and anxiety. So simply put, the goal of legalizing PAD is to help enhance the quality of the dying process. So this is still quite a taboo topic, pretty much across Asia because of the cultural context, including Japan. But it's time to bring this up as a subject of a serious, open public conversation, I believe. I'm not necessarily promoting legalization of the PAD, but at least more research should be done to thoroughly examine both advantages and disadvantages of implementing the seemingly drastic way of enhancing the quality dying process, at least for some people, and to see if this practice may actually work well in our own culture, legal, and social contexts. All right. Finally, I'd like to call for a revival or reintroduction of what could be called a death education in society as a whole, especially in school. Put it back in school. That's what I'm saying. Death education is a set of education aiming to help the next generations better understand the social psychological process and social psychological needs of dying people, and get prepared for providing them with informal, basic familial care at home and in their communities. But in fact, death education has long been an integral part of high school education and junior high educations here in Japan up until the mid-60s. So this way, not just medical and healthcare professionals, but society as a whole, culture as a whole, may get better prepared for the coming of a death-laden society. I wish I could talk more, but I guess this is it for now. Just want to say thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Prof. Higo. I wish you could talk more as well. We do have a little bit of time. I hope you'll allow us to ask you some of the questions that have come through. Just as an aside, if you don't mind me saying so, your last slide where you talked about death education is something that struck me as being really important. I think probably you're in the same position as I am. You get to a certain age where many of your friends wind up caring for their old parents, and their lives get really miserable. There's a true economic cost to having to care for your parents individually, and of course the emotional, psychological stresses that are involved. And it strikes me that this introduction of reintroduction of death education is a really good way to let people know, it's okay. There are other ways that you can manage this instead of just doing it on your own. Was that what you were kind of thinking?
Definitely, and thank you for this really constructive and supplemental comment for my very brief mentioning of this part of suggestion, like death education. That's exactly what I meant to say as well. But the bottom line is that this education is, I believe, very crucial to help us, especially the younger generations, not just to get prepared for providing some technical, healthcare or emotional support for the dying people in the communities, but simply to they have to learn that death is not something to be scared of. We have to understand that death or end of life is part of our life course. That's really part of our life. And then it could be a little misleading to say that society should be prepared for passing quality of dying and quality dying, because dying is part of life. Therefore, when we are talking about quality of life, quality, living, that means that should include the very last moment of our lives. And early education, including this subject, is very crucial to get to prepare the whole society to calm down and to respond to the coming of death society in a very rational and humane way at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot with kind of a difficult question? Because when I was, you asked where would you like to die, and my thought was, I don't actually care so much about, well, maybe I do, but to me, it's not about where I would like to die, but rather with whom around me. And I think for many, aged Japanese who have worked very hard through their careers, particularly men, that have become a little bit distanced from their kids. And so, when they get to their deathbeds, they feel that they would like to reconcile with their kids, but they don't know how. And for them, it's probably the most important thing is to somehow reconcile with your kids. How would you propose doing that?
Is there anything else you wanted to
No.
include? Oh, okay, all right. Well, I really appreciate you bring up this topic. Let me just go back to the slide relevant to this part of the conversation. All right, the pie chart, my favorite one. Okay, well, first of all, since you mentioned about family relations in a deathbed, so to speak, our relationship with kids. If you take a look at this pie chart again, you see that still hospital, these answer options get like about 30%. And interestingly, I didn't have enough space or time to include another outcome of the same survey conducted by Nippon Foundation. But another survey question asks the respondents, like, where will be the last place you like to spend the last moment in your life? The vast majority of the respondents say at their kids' home, at the children's home. And why? I mean, some quantitative study carried out to uncover some, some of the main reasons. The main reason is that they don't want to be a burden on their kids. They don't want to show their last moment of their life to the kids because maybe it's a little unpleasant, or maybe that's not the kind of self or stage of your life to be exposed to your children. They might want to live, might want to actually live into the memory in a really good shape, good image of themselves. So they like to rather dissociate themselves from the presence of their children, especially at the moment of, dying. So what I found about from this survey was a little interesting contrast to what you say in some ways. But yeah, that's very interesting. And then, but this, as you can tell, survey like this, opinion survey like this is highly challenging, highly difficult to carry out because of the subject and because of our unpreparedness to respond to this, kind of questions. We can certainly learn a whole bunch of surveys to ask about what kind of job would you like to have when you grow up, and when would you like to get married over the course of your life. But when it comes to the moment of death, I think people have really, really hard time figuring out what's actually on their mind. So I don't know how to interpret those, research, survey outcomes. But it seems like some people have a special stake in the relationship with their children. Some people may be, just like you said, maybe the dying moment is the last chance for them to reconcile with their children, reconstruct positive image of themselves in the mind of the kids as they leave this world. Simultaneously, I think it's realistic that some people simply don't want to show their dying moment to their children. Right. So that's another interesting question to continue uncovering through research, I guess.
Great. Thank you. If I may, I'm aware that we're right up against time, but I'd like to ask a two birds with one stone question. Prof. Yokota says he's asking about medical costs. And so he says, how can medical costs be reduced, in your opinion, in a death-laden society? Does it involve technology such as robots, AI, VR, telemedicine, or is there something else that is more impactful for helping to reduce costs?
My quick response, you're at the very right spot. I think it's got to be a solution, if there's any solution for this. It could be a combination of a number of different practices, including, continuous advancement and effective introduction of AI technologies, or including what's called geriatric telemedicine, aiming specifically for elderly people, and in many ways, like promoting, as I said, home care as opposed to medical care at hospital. Depending on how we promote in-home medical care, it might make some contribution to help reduce the medical cost. But it's got to be a combination of a wide variety of different kinds of practice, I think. And I hope I got a chance to talk about more in detail some of the opportunities.
Indeed. In fact, I think we're going to need a round two of the Gold Bag Seminar series very shortly. Professor Higo, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise today. Okay, folks, thank you for joining us. That concludes Brown Bag Seminar number 12. I'm going to pass you over to Obata-san, or is it Yamaguchi-sensei, who will just highlight next week's Brown Bag Seminar and has a quick survey to ask you to fill out and provide us some feedback. Thank you all for joining.
Higo 先生、バレンタイン先生、ありがとうございました。最後に事務局より2点ご案内させていただきます。 まず次回のブラウンバックセミナーについてのご案内です。次回は来週7月14日の水曜日の12時10分より、九州大学応用力学研究所の市川薫准教授より、海を見る、どうして、どうやってと題して講演を実施いたします。詳細はホームページをご覧ください。